When you think of America, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Is it freedom? Is it hamburgers? Is it freedom hamburgers? What about crippling systemic inequality, racism and xenophobia, and an economic system designed to make the rich richer and the poor poorer? Today, I want to tell you about a planet in the Star Wars universe that captures those aspects so shockingly succinctly. That planet is Taris, one of the places your journey takes you in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, a 2003 RPG that's widely considered to be one of the greatest video games of all time. Taris is an ecumenopolis, a planet covered entirely by a single city. Despite its chrome exterior, it's a society rife with ignorance.
I ain't never left Taris, and they ain't never gonna.
Inequality.
Please have pity on us. We have nothing.
Cruelty.
Davik killed my father and sold me into slavery here at the Vulcar compound to pay off the debt.
I guess she's too important to be a slave here in the kitchens. Getting pawed and groped and kicked and spit on like me.
And racism.
I will find you when the day of reckoning is upon us, and together we will rid beautiful Taris of these alien species.
Sound familiar?
The people here can be selfish, greedy, arrogant, even prejudiced.
The planet city of Taris, as seen in Knights of the Old Republic, is divided into 3 regions.
From what I hear, the wealthy live on the tops of all the tall towers, and if you're poor, you live down in the shadows. And it gets worse the lower you go.
You've got the wealthy upper city, the crime-infested, decaying lower city where non-humans are forced to live, and the beyond destitute undercity. I found the way that Knights of the Old Republic represented Taris's social stratification and the way it's clearly commenting on American society to be very interesting. KOTOR was released in 2003, nearly 20 years ago, and its themes and messages ring true more so today than perhaps ever. This is the most American Star Wars planet.
Nice outfit. I've seen outcasts in the Undercity who dress better than you.
Let's examine Taris and the ways it connects to the conditions of those living in the United States, starting at the very bottom of Taris's social hierarchy, the Undercity. See, Taris has a pretty black and white justice system.
Justice here on Taris is swift and harsh.
The punishments for any crime are execution or eternal banishment to the Undercity.
There are only 2 punishments: execution or banishment to the Undercity.
Hey, I just said that. The Undercity is riddled with disease and extreme levels of poverty. The people, known as the outcasts, have no possessions, no homes.
We have no food, no weapons, nothing. How can we live like this? We're doomed.
And are never allowed to emerge from the shadows of Taris's gleaming skyscrapers. Their descendants, too, are forced to live permanently in the Undercity.
Anyone banished can never return on pain of death. Even their descendants are forced to live in the depths beneath our great cities.
I'll let Rukil, the century-old village elder in the Undercity's outcast village, explain the history of their people.
He's over 100 years old.
A century ago, rising levels of toxic pollution poisoned the oceans, and famine swept the planet. The rich hoarded food for their own use, and the poor were left to starve and die. But the poor rose up against this tyranny, and civil war engulfed the planet. Millions died in the fighting, and huge sections of Taris were destroyed or abandoned. The rebellion was crushed in the end. Thousands were taken prisoner. The jails could not hold them all, and so the practice of banishing all prisoners to the Undercity was born. Many brave men and women were banished here to the Undercity for their part in the rebellion. People like my father and grandfather were cast down, along with their families.
What did you expect? If they could get away with it, the Tarisian nobles would stuff their own mothers down here to make more room in the upper city.
So there's a lot to unpack here. First off, it's kind of incredible that the cause of these people's misfortunes was pollution. Climate change and environmental pollution are huge existential threats to the world today.
And of course, in order to fix global warming, which is existential, whatever that means,
despite them being a controversial subject for approximately half of the United States voting population. The more interesting element to me is that it also got right the eventual effects of unmitigated climate change. The poor will be by far the most seriously affected in our world as well. On Taris, the wealthy took more than they needed, and the poor were forced to suffer.
What? Why are you speaking to me? Can't you tell from my clothing that I'm of the nobility? Get away from me. I can't be seen talking with a common rabble. It wouldn't be proper for a man of my standing.
In our world, the impending calamity of anthropogenic climate change is also one supported solely by the greediness of a small number of individuals. No matter how much corporations want to convince you that solving climate change falls on you, the individual, the reality is that just 100 companies account for over 70% of all greenhouse emissions worldwide. They happily pollute for profit and then pay off our politicians to prevent any legislation that would stop their damaging actions. Now, I'm not a fan of either of America's two major political parties, but I mean, you can clearly see how one party is astronomically worse than the other in this regard. Rookhill goes on to describe how the Undercity came to be after the citizens of Taris failed to rise up and take down the wealthy who had hoarded all of Taris's dwindling resources for themselves.
I feel sorry for the outcasts that are forced to live there.
But what about the Taris of today? Why are the horrific injustices of the Undercity allowed to persist? You would think that after a century, the people of Taris would have been able to develop some level of sympathy toward the Undercity's residents. That was actually the impetus to start this video. It had been a little while since I'd replayed Knights of the Old Republic, and I wanted to explore how sad it was that the people of Taris are able to live their lives completely ignorant to the mistreatment of the Undercity outcasts. The truth, however, ended up being much worse. The people in the Upper City are more than aware of the Lower City and Undercity's conditions. They're constantly cracking jokes about them at your expense even.
Nice outfit. You steal those clothes from a bum in the Lower City? Oh well, guess you don't have to have good taste in clothes to come and enjoy the music.
Who dresses you? You look like you crawled up here from the Lower City. Oh well, I guess we can't all have style.
In fact, you're given a pretty good shot at ruining the Undercity outcasts' lives even more. The Undercity is plagued by the rat ghoul disease, an illness that causes extreme suffering to its hosts. The final stages of the disease result in the host transforming into monster-like creatures called rat ghouls.
The terrible affliction has plagued Taris for many generations. It is spread by the rat ghouls, horrible monsters that live in the Undercity below Taris's great skyscrapers. Prolonged exposure to the Undercity breeds the disease, and those infected will eventually mutate into rat ghouls themselves.
Please, help us! We're infected with the rat ghoul disease. At any moment we could... No! This cannot be... No!
In your journey, you actually find a cure for the disease and are given two options. You can distribute it free of charge with the help of a kind-hearted doctor, saving countless lives from extreme hardship and death.
If I could just get my hands on a sample of that serum, the rat ghoul disease could be wiped from the face of Taris forever.
Or sell it to Davik, the local crime boss, for some cash, who will then commoditize and monopolize it, charging high prices that the Undercity citizens could never afford.
Davik Kang will pay you 10 times what Zelka can if you can get the cure. Davik's interested in anything that can turn a profit. He could make a fortune selling the serum to anyone infected with the disease. Not like Zelka, who'll practically give it away. The best thing to do is to take the rat ghoul serum to Zax. He runs the Lower City bounty office, but everyone knows he also works for Davik. He'll make it worth your while.
I can even provide a cure for the rat ghoul disease, though it is very expensive. Davik has a monopoly on the antidote, and he's selling the serum for a ridiculous fee. Davik's doing everything he can to protect his monopoly. All the samples he provides are treated, making it impossible to analyze their composition and create my own stores of the serum.
Which is definitely not something that happens in the United States. Nope. Not at all.
Poor folk always smell so good.
As a side note, isn't it weird how all of the greedy and racist people in the game are shown to be slimy, disgusting, horrible assholes? I wonder why that is.
Gendar seems to think I should share the profits of my store with the whole village. He figures we're all in this together, so it should be share and share alike.
As you explore the Undercity, your journey eventually takes you even deeper, down to the Tarisian sewers, a stone's throw away from the residents of the outcast village. They get to be literally drenched by the piss and shit of the more wealthy citizens of the city. Kinda poetic. So yeah, the Undercity is filled with people living in extreme destitution, and the majority of the people in the Upper City either don't care at all or are incredibly, actively malicious to these impoverished people.
Maybe if more people in the Upper City weren't so self-centered, things wouldn't be so bad in the Lower City and the Undercity.
I mean, that doesn't sound like America, right? We treat our poor and homeless and poverty-stricken citizens with the dignity and support they deserve, right? We don't ignore them entirely or outright mistreat them, right? Yeah, we do.
Adam Cartwright and Marcy Collard were each homeless for 5 years, most recently in downtown Austin.
We had so many people throw glass bottles from their cars at our tents.
Or some would yell out, "Go home." It's like, this is technically our home.
For the 4th consecutive year, it increased nationwide, with the most recent count suggesting there are over 580,000 people experiencing homelessness in America. But the truth is, it is likely way more than that, because that annual count only includes people that surveyors could find on the streets or in shelters on a single night last year, a system that misses countless people.
Why are homelessness rates rising in the richest country in history?
No matter what they tell you, homelessness is not an act of God. It's not the result of economic collapse in this country. America did not run out of housing. Instead, a determined group of well-funded ideologues decided to make it easier to live on the streets in this country while doing drugs. Therefore, many more people now live on the streets while doing drugs. See? Not complicated.
Clearly, some would argue that homelessness is growing because America has too many social welfare programs. I'ma say probably not. I mean, there has to be some kind of major force responsible for— oh, fuck, Ronnie. What was I thinking? Of course you're involved when something horrible happens.
And like so many things, the modern version of this issue was turbocharged by Ronald Reagan, who came to power at a time when homelessness was increasing and made the problem far worse by cutting programs for the poor and slashing housing subsidies by 75%, making it pretty galling that Reagan regularly made arguments like this.
One problem that we've had even in the best of times, and that is the people who are sleeping on the grates. The homeless who are homeless, you might say, by choice.
Now, the people in the Tarisian Undercity aren't able to get jobs and elevate themselves by law. This is a de jure situation for them, but the fact that we have so many countless people experiencing homelessness or joblessness or low wages in general is evidence of the same situation in the form of de facto oppression. Even I, up until the last couple of years, was of the opinion that homelessness was a choice. It simply isn't, no more than it's a choice for those Tarisians to live in the Undercity, really. The fact that even the children of those banished to the Undercity are forced to live there is also interesting to me.
I've never been to the surface, but sometimes I think I can see it in my dreams. The sun, the sky, the stars.
While this is another aspect that's de jure on Taris, this is the de facto situation for millions of Americans. Again, I'm talking about generational poverty. If your parents were poor and uneducated, there's a very high chance that you're going to be poor and uneducated. Poorer people simply don't have the same access to resources or life paths in general that lead them to becoming wealthy, and poverty and homelessness are inexorably tied.
Stunning views of the Space Needle in Puget Sound. Do you have one of those? Well, crackheads do.
Banishment to the Undercity for life as a form of criminal punishment is unimaginably cruel. Nobody, regardless of their crimes, is deserving of these sorts of conditions. The cherry on top is that all of this started because people were protesting their unjust conditions. We don't do that, right? No, fuck, we do. Well, at least we can rest easy knowing that the justice system in the United States is one based on empathy, understanding, and teaching, in which we, as citizens, understand that crime is a direct result of a dysfunctional socioeconomic system and not the badness of individuals, and people who commit crimes should be given the attention, compassion, and means to rehabilitate that they missed out on in their life's journey that led them to be in a position where they felt the need to commit a crime. And okay, we all know I'm clearly bullshitting here. We demonize and taunt people who commit crimes just about as bad as the Tarisians.
Go directly to jail. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, and do not, I repeat, do not drop the soap.
And subject them to immoral and dehumanizing conditions as well in our prison systems. It would take days to detail the problems with our broken criminal justice system. You could look at our bloodthirsty police officers who receive very little training and do things like intentionally coax out wrongful confessions.
Of all the convictions that have been overturned through DNA testing, 29% involved false confessions.
Or our draconian laws that result in people being improperly charged and incarcerated, which can often lead to situations that result in devastating consequences, like the man who was murdered by a police officer in Louisiana while being arrested for breaking his city's law against sagging his fucking pants, of all things. Or maybe how American prisons are one of the most evident places where slavery is able to persist in a developed country. It's important to understand that, generally speaking, crime at any scale in any social class is a direct result of a dysfunctional socioeconomic system, and that the way to prevent crimes from happening is not to mistreat the people who commit them, but to eliminate the conditions that allow for your society to create people who want or need to commit crimes in the first place. That comes with expanding education and other social programs to historically underfunded areas, teaching empathy to your fellow people as a virtue, generally paying people more, of course, and taking comprehensive steps to plug all of the gaping holes in every level of our utterly broken criminal justice system. So again, while the conditions of the criminals of Taris are despicable and inexcusable, the same can absolutely be said about Americans who commit crimes in different ways. If you're horrified by the way the Undercity outcasts are treated, as you should be, then you should be equally horrified by the way many of our own people are forced to live.
My dad's in jail.
Why?
I don't like to talk about it. Most people don't understand.
Look, I get it. Many of the people in prison, and I'm sure some of those in the Undercity, have caused significant harm to others, oftentimes in unthinkably cruel ways, which makes giving them sympathy an incredibly difficult thing for even the most forward-thinking and empathetic individual to do. Maybe I'm crazy, but I believe in compassion, forgiveness, and giving the opportunity for second chances to everyone, even to those who do the unthinkable.
This is Trond Blattman. On July 22nd, 2011, he lost his 17-year-old son when he was murdered with 54 other teenagers on a summer camp island in a lake in Norway. You cared about whether he had a fair trial?
Yeah.
You?
Yeah.
You yourself?
Yeah.
But don't you personally want to kill him?
No.
If you had the chance?
No.
If you had the chance?
No.
But he killed your son.
Yeah, but no.
You don't want to kill him?
No.
When you contrast the heights of the glorious Tarisian upper city to the lows of the despondent undercity, you get the strong feeling that something must be incredibly broken systemically that allows for such incredible variation in socioeconomic conditions. It's the same in the United States. Despite being the richest country ever, the United States has an incredibly high poverty rate relative to other developed nations. Let's look at this graph of total poverty rates among a smattering of developed nations. Can you see where we are? We're here. Over 1 in 10 Americans is currently experiencing poverty. This should not be happening anywhere, let alone the richest country there is. The money to help our less fortunate citizens exists, but as a society, we choose to spend our money in comically stupid ways. In 2021, the United States federal government had $1.6 trillion in discretionary spending to play with. We chose to spend nearly half of that on our military. The United States spends more on its military than the next 6 countries combined. If you're shocked by that, go splash yourself with some water, because we actually spend more money on our military than the next 11 countries combined. Now, please don't take what I'm getting at incorrectly. Defense spending is a necessary evil. For instance, look no further than Taris. Taris notably had no real military presence. On the entire planet, it had exactly one military outpost manned by the galactic government, but that's it. Throughout Taris's history, there were several instances where an occupying force was able to swoop in, including the setting of the game. During the events of Knights of the Old Republic, the villainous Sith just kind of arrived and took control of the planet without any resistance.
If the Sith wanted to get on everyone's good side, they'd go clean up the swoop gangs in the lower city.
Spoilers for the game, but when the lead villain, Darth Malik, realizes it's his last chance to take down you and your companions, he just decides to ice the entire fucking planet. They should have followed the Hasanabi Doctrine.
Here, this is known as the Hasanabi Doctrine. Rule number 1, get nukes. Rule number 2, do not give up the nukes.
Our military spending is incredibly wasteful in countless ways that are simply too numerous to even begin articulating. The fact that we spend even a penny more on our military than our fucking education budget is an outright unmitigated travesty alone, but when you look at what we spend on transportation, housing, energy, labor, fucking science relative to our military, it paints a clear picture as to where the priorities of our government are. And those priorities rest squarely on one thing: making the rich richer. The top 1% of the United States population controls $12.4 trillion in wealth today. That money, for the most part, is not being used in any way to benefit society, despite what certain pieces of garbage would lead you to believe. It's just sitting there. In stocks and in bank accounts, in $500 million yachts and $250 million villas. Is this the best and most ethical place for this money to be spent while tens of millions of people can't reasonably afford healthcare? It's the same shit on Taris. We've got nobles who hoard resources, we have a weak middle class and a destitute lower class. How much control of the wealth do you think the upper city controls? 50%? 60%? In the US, 10% of Americans control 70% of the country's wealth, with half of that being controlled by the top 1%. We've got people like Davik, who you may think is an exception because he pretty openly commits crimes and ethics violations, but our crime lords do it too. Let's talk numbers again. Remember that $1.6 trillion per year in discretionary spending? It would only cost an extra $200 billion per year to end homelessness in America forever. We spend $750 billion on the military. Let's just shave $200 billion off and just end homelessness. Again, maybe I'm crazy, but I sincerely think that that would be a more useful use of that money than bombing children thousands of miles away. Thanks, Obama.
And the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, anyway.
If that sounds completely reasonable to you, especially with that $12.4 trillion that the 1% are just sitting on like the horrific monsters they're equated to in medieval folklore, let's take a pause because I'm so sorry to admit that I've been lying to you about some numbers once again. See, according to a 2012 study conducted by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, it would only cost around $20 billion per year to permanently end homelessness, not $200. Now, this number is disputed, with PolitiFact reporting that the number might be closer to $60 billion per year to truly close the gap on homelessness, while also stating that simply building the housing necessary could cost a total of $1.3 trillion. Okay, sure, now we're talking real money, but this wouldn't have to be all at once, and the money is there. It's right there. Literally, right there. There are a million ways to extract that money from the 1%. I'm not saying it would be easy, but it's certainly not impossible.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
Increasing taxes on capital gains, progressive tax rates, literally ingesting them. We, the people, outnumber these greedy, villainous bastards 100 to 1.
It's you who need us.
If we truly wanted to enact change and make that money really start trickling down, there are many methods at our disposal. And I'm not even talking about anything extreme here. We could solve homelessness, give every American access to healthcare, a quality education, clean energy, robust public transportation, and so much more, and the millionaires and billionaires would still be millionaires and billionaires, only with slightly fewer millions and billions. What is it to someone being worth $768 million versus $254 million when someone else has access to housing and education and healthcare? Now, with all of that said, extracting the $1.3 trillion it would take to end homelessness would be taking around 10% of the richest hoard of wealth, which does sound like a lot, I guess, so let me quell your worries once and for all because I wasn't done lying to you. I completely made up that $12.4 trillion number in regard to how much capital the 1% controls.
All those credits. It's enough to make a girl get all flushed.
The real number, and I'm not gonna lie to you anymore, I 100% promise, is closer to $41.5 trillion. That's how much money the top 1% of this country control. Taking just $1 trillion to end homelessness doesn't seem so scary anymore now, does it? For reference, the bottom 50% of Americans only control around $13.73 trillion. Aw, fuck, my bad. I did it again. I meant $3.73 trillion. Regardless of your political leanings, you can't say with a straight face that this is evidence of a healthy socioeconomic system. Now, I'm not naive, and I understand that the rich aren't literally a bank account where citizens can just swipe a card to withdraw funds, but you'd be nuts to think that there's absolutely no feasible way for any of that $42+ trillion to trickle down and actually start benefiting society. Taris, y'all should do this too. I will say, for all of its commentary, Taris doesn't talk economics too much. I just wanted one Teresa Noble to be like, the radical lower city left wants to raise our taxes to pay for their access to potable water? Why don't they just pull themselves up by their bootstraps like I did? Doesn't everyone have access to the vast connections of their wealthy parents like me? We've tried trickle-down economics. Given how wealth inequality is up, wages are not keeping up with inflation, fewer people have healthcare, etc., etc., it's clearly not working. Remember how your boomer parents longed for the 1950s? There's a reason for that. It's because they're racist, but also taxes on the rich were high, and our government actually worked to develop the middle class and elevate those in lower classes. If you were white, of course. It all changed when somehow a slimy piece of shit con man managed to sell the lie not once, not twice, but 11 times and counting that somehow the answer to all of our economic woes is to give millionaires and fucking billionaires more fucking money? What?
Now let me show you a chart that I've had drawn to illustrate how this can be. Here you see two trend lines. The bottom line.
How does Jeff Bezos being able to purchase a $500 million yacht improve the lives of the middle and lower classes? How? This is the greatest lie ever told, and the fact that seemingly hundreds of millions of Americans are under the spell that this is a reasonable solution to our problems is an unfathomable, truly unbelievable concept to me. The free market has severe limitations, and without strict regulation and moderation by a population of educated, informed, and empathetic individuals, it's a system that can very easily become highly exploitative. Is it a coincidence, then, that the more evil of our two terrible political parties in the United States is constantly trying to cut our education budget?
I love the poorly educated.
Oh, I'm sure you do, Trumpy. I'm sure you do. Now, while these people are facing the worst levels of poverty, they are far from the only ones experiencing issues on Taris. The lower city, where aliens and those not wealthy enough to live in the upper city are forced to reside, is also clear evidence of major systemic issues plaguing Taris, definitely visually. You could say that the writers' naming conventions are a little on the nose. The upper city is where upper class people live, the lower city is where lower class people live, and the Undercity is the underbelly of their society. There's technically also a middle city, though it's only mentioned in the Knights of the Old Republic comic book series, never in the game, so I won't discuss it here. While not too overt, the game brushes on the subject of illegal immigration as well.
Wato yuma wamahuhunanetik. Shotungni patoga. Wano kuzbe ching palamule tonke. Tag biz juponko kokimakpanka. Ching pala chiska mule tunarana nu prata donko sicha duma wamamatus keba toma.
As I said earlier, aliens are mostly forbidden from accessing the upper city, but some take the chance anyway, presumably because even risking Tarisian prosecution is better than the conditions of the lower city. Once again, it's the same in the US. We have refugees coming here seeking better lives, risking our horrific anti-immigration institutions. But instead of providing them with compassion and human dignity, we shun them as well.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come.
Unless they're white. As far as I can tell, middle-class people seem to live in the upper city of Taris, but you can see that there's a pretty distinct difference between who the middle-class and upper-class Tarisian citizens are. The true upper class, referred to as nobles, are snooty, greedy, entitled, and out of touch, which is strange because our upper class does not fit that description one bit, no sir.
Where did you get those clothes? A trash compactor in the lower city? And where are those drinks we ordered?
Careful what you say. I get the feeling the spoiled brat could cause us more trouble than she's worth.
Why is the help here so incompetent? One word from Daddy and I could get you fired. How dare you speak to me like that? Daddy's going to hear about this.
The others, who I would call middle-class Tarisians, are not without their own problems. For instance, many people in both the upper and lower city owe money to Davik, that crime lord we discussed earlier.
I'm in the wrong business. Davik's got a piece of everyone's action. I should have been a crime lord too.
My wife warned me not to take a loan from Davik. Now I can't pay him back. It's not good to owe a crime lord money.
You don't have to kill me. I'll have Davik's money if he just gives me a little more time. Please. I don't want to die.
Extortion, slavery, smuggling. Davik's got a piece of all the action here on Taris.
Oh, come on. Everybody knows who Davik Kang is. He's the big boss around here. Gambling, smuggling, extortion. He's got a piece of all the action on Taris. I prefer to think of him as a role model. He started with nothing, and now he's got it all. Credits, power, women. It's the Tarisian dream, right?
Suggesting that the Tarisian economy is not strong enough to sustain a healthy middle class. In the US, the middle class is not nearly as strong as it was before this era of toxic Reaganomics we're still stuck in. Middle-class Americans don't have money saved up anymore, earnings are low because protections for workers are disintegrating, and our government exists solely as a funnel to transfer money upward to people who do not need it, away from the people who do, who would truly invest it into the economy rather than just sitting on it for the most part.
It's gotta circulate, circulate, come out of the woods, stimulate, motivate, service and goods. It's no nest egg to incubate, money's got to circulate. Money's gotta circulate.
While middle-class people get to have housing, can purchase food, and have access to certain levels of creature comforts, the truth is, life is only getting harder and harder for them as well, and their ability to exist is tied directly to the company they work for and whatever wages they're willing to pay them. When 64% of the country is living paycheck to paycheck, it's honestly not surprising how little the majority of Americans care about people facing more extreme levels of socioeconomic stress. Most Americans who aren't currently in poverty are just hanging by a thread, and it's hard to think about others when your needs aren't really being fulfilled. I suppose the same could be said for Taris. Despite its aesthetics, life for most upper city Tarisians seems pretty difficult too, just in different ways. But hey, at least people who have more money than they could ever need to live comfortably are getting more money. This is a healthy economic system, right? Wait. What was that last one? In 2020, the ultra-rich got richer, now they're bracing for backlash. What? From whom? Progressives are an overwhelmingly small minority in the United States, with only about 7% of Americans identifying as very liberal in a recent Gallup poll. With that said, raising taxes on the rich is surprisingly popular among voters, but for some odd reason, that desire can't seem to translate into actual policy. God, maybe I'm missing something again, but an economic system where people can afford to live like this while others live like this is clear evidence that— oh, sorry. Wrong pictures. An economic system where people can afford to live like this while others live like this is clear evidence that we need systemic change, and that the middle and lower classes having fewer resources and money today than ever before is not a result of laziness or personal choices. Okay, usually.
So I think laziness is a virtue.
Both Taris and the United States are places where the ultra-wealthy can do whatever they want with impunity, and everyone else is forced to fight for scraps. Like the God Kings in our society, we get a brief glimpse at what the wealthy are able to experience on Taris when our journey takes us to the estate of the crime lord Davik. Obviously, the game is severely handicapped visually by the limitations of its era's technology, but we can plainly see that wealth inequality is a severe issue on Taris. Do these upper city apartments even have bathrooms? What the fuck?
I don't require anything right now. You can tell Davik everything about my stay has been most pleasing so far. Here's a 5-credit chip for your trouble, sir.
You want to solve poverty? Give more money and resources to the general public, not to people who have way more than they could ever need, who ultimately won't do anything positive with it anyway. How many times do I have to show you this stupid fucking yacht? We won't solve economic inequality by criminalizing poverty, and we certainly won't solve it by doing absolutely nothing, which has been our strategy thus far. Now, don't worry, I understand that this won't be cheap. God, if only there was more money somewhere. If you're too scared to shrink our inflated and wasteful military budget, could we, I don't know, tax some people? Now, I've already lost about 90% of the United States voting population because I even hinted at raising taxes for anyone, but hear me out. I don't want to raise your taxes, person watching this. I don't want to raise your parents' taxes. I don't want to raise your dog's taxes. I only want to raise taxes on, let's say a certain 1% of the American population. This guy, hell, even this guy. Is it okay to want creature comforts? Of course. Should you get more if you work hard or create something that people connect with and are willing to pay you for? I think so. I promise, the last thing I'm advocating for is complete equality of outcome. I just want to reach a level of equality of opportunity that I don't feel we're at yet. Same goes for Taris. A child born in the lower city is not going to have the same amount of paths to success as someone born in the upper city.
My mama says I have to stay out of the lower city. That's where the bad people live.
I think there's absolutely a reasonable amount of things a person should be able to have that they don't necessarily need in order to fulfill their biological imperatives. However, there has to be a line somewhere, right? A line that you cross where you're taking from your community, from your society, significantly more than you could ever possibly need to live a comfortable and fulfilling life and start to cause outright harm to the people you're taking from. This occurs most obviously and most disgustingly at the top level, of course. Let's take Jeff Bezos, for instance. We keep talking about his fucking yacht. At the time of this recording, he's worth $180 billion.
Now, how much is in this hat?
Gee, $1 billion? Or more than that.
See what I mean? They were nowhere near. There's only 100,000 here.
$1 billion stacked up right without an accident is about 800 times the height of the Washington Monument. $1 billion on the ground, all stretched out and uncurled, would extend about 4 times around the circumference of the world.
The idea that people like him need, or frankly deserve, that much money is a completely bizarre concept to me. Like, just why isn't he paying his employees more? Now, you should go and delete that comment stating that most of his wealth is tied to stock and that he can't liquidate all of it without crashing his share price. I get that, but it turns out you can liquidate some of that stock and then that turns it into money that you can use to pay people.
Gosh, $1 billion sure is a lot.
Jeff already liquidates tons of money every year. Amazon has around 1 million warehouse workers in the US. If Jeff liquidated just another $4 billion each year, he could personally afford to pay each and every one of those warehouse workers an additional $4,000. That would be a life-changing amount of money to a lot of those people. To Bezos, it's the difference between being worth $180 billion and $176 billion. The only way that Jeff is able to have that much money in the first place is in heavy part through other people's labor. I'm not trying to diminish the need for job creators and for people to create companies and take risks and whatnot. All I'm really saying is that Jeff Bezos can afford to pay his employees significantly more than he's paying them and not bat a single eyelash. Again, what is the difference to him between being worth $176 billion versus $180 billion? How does this affect his or his children's abilities to live comfortable, fulfilling lives? It wouldn't. He could take just $5 million, $10 million, $100 million, and never have to worry about his or his family's needs again, and then do an unfathomable amount of good with the money he's hoarding, but he chooses not to. Even something as simple as taking out a few extra billion each year to give another $4,000 to his employees would have a huge effect on how 1 million deserving people would be able to live their lives. And that's just Jeff Bezos at Amazon. There are countless people at Amazon earning more than they need who could take a small pay cut that would not affect their abilities to live comfortable lives, to fund pay raises to the million people whose back-breaking, pee-bottle filling, underpaid labor gives them their cushy positions.
Way of the road, bubs.
And for the love of God, do not misconstrue what I'm saying. I do not believe that all jobs deserve the exact same compensation. However, I do believe that the gap is widening to a worrisome extent, and I do not believe that the free market is necessarily the most ethical way to determine what people deserve to be paid. Workers deserve to have more say in their pay and working conditions, which is why unions are such an incredibly important and powerful tool for workers. There's a reason why Amazon, Starbucks, and mega corporations like them spend millions upon millions of dollars every year fighting tooth and nail to prevent their employees from unionizing.
We do not believe unions are in the best interest of our customers, our shareholders, or most importantly, our associates. If you see warning signs of potential organizing, notify your building HRM and GM site leader immediately. The most obvious signs would include use of words associated with unions or union-led movements like living wage.
Can you say with a straight face that Amazon and all companies like it are fighting unions truly to protect their workers and not for their own personal profits? Seriously?
We want to thank Jeff Bezos for going to space, because when he was up there, we were signing people up.
We was down there campaigning.
Our economic system incentivizes paying employees at best the absolute utter bare minimum possible, and at worst, significantly less than what their labor is actually worth. They're fighting to stop unions because the people who have more than they could ever possibly need will have to give just a few more crumbs to the people who desperately actually need them. As this YouTube comment succinctly puts it, if someone is telling you that you don't need a union, you absolutely need a union. Unions give workers more of a say in how they are compensated and in their overall working conditions. Are they always perfect 100% of the time? No. But when all elements are considered, they tend to average out to a significant net positive to labor rights for employees.
You forgot that the people are the ones who make these companies operate.
Wait, I get to drive a forklift?
Redistribution of wealth should not be a scary subject. It definitely isn't to the already ultra-wealthy, since they're more than happy to coordinate with our government to siphon money from the lower and middle classes to the top. So, the economic situation, even in the upper city of Taris, isn't exactly sunshine and rainbows. The other big issue, and the one most immediately apparent to the player, is racism.
Get out of here, you goggle-eyed freak! You're too ugly for the upper city.
Yeah, go back to where you came from. We don't want your kind up here.
Yeah, why would a human want to help you, freak? Take that, you alien scum!
Wow, you got him good that time. Hey, I think he's dead. Let's get out of here.
See, the Upper City has a de jure ban on most non-humans.
I am speaking of the hideous-looking aliens who walk the world of Taris. The Wookiees and Ithorians and Rhodians and Bith, all of them. Listen, friend, for these are dark times. That is why I,
Tucker Carlson,
have formed the Anti-Alien League. The time has come for action. We cannot sit idly by while aliens blight our glorious planet.
The first thing we see is the occupying government conducting a raid against an apartment complex that's illegally housing non-humans.
That's how we deal with smart-mouthed aliens. Now, the rest of you get up against the wall before I lose my temper again.
On Taris, most aliens are forced to live in the gang-riddled, crime-infested lower city. Many aliens that you interact with on Taris speak to the planet's harsh treatment of non-humans.
Kipuna, bonana kichu, kinba mulera dwana, don kinba no kudnok nek, kavanumpa kumpialia monokata, rangakun bis kin no moruat.
Chachiska.
You even meet a guy standing on a street corner preaching about how he wants to kill all aliens.
The evil walks among us. The enemy is here. We must act now before we are overrun with the vermin invaders.
This guy is the least racist conservative, by the way. There are a lot of people in the United States who feel the same way about immigrants as the Tarisians.
Fox News star Tucker Carlson is standing by comments he made about immigration, which some have called racist.
We have a moral obligation to admit the world's poor, they tell us, even if it makes our own country poorer and dirtier and more divided.
They say horrible things about them and spread lies that they somehow bring crime, when in reality immigrants, even undocumented ones, commit far fewer crimes than the average American citizen.
We have people coming into the country, or trying to come in. We're stopping a lot of them. But we're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals.
But there's a reason Biden said it. In political terms, this policy is called the Great Replacement, the replacement of legacy Americans with more obedient people from faraway countries.
Ultimately, what that shooting represents and what it came from is an ideology. And that ideology is becoming more mainstream. You know, the shooter in Buffalo was motivated to do that because of replacement theory.
The Great Replacement theory is coming from the left. They don't think it's a theory, they think it's real.
You'd think people would be a little more tolerant of others in this day and age. I guess stupidity and ignorance will never go out of style.
Yo! Based Carthonasi. I know everyone thinks you're the lamest companion, Carth, but damn, that was fire.
I don't want to talk about it right now. Let's go.
Alien species have restricted access to the Upper City. This is one of the most ancient traditions of Taris.
Huh, interesting. Is racism one of America's oldest traditions too? Some would say yes, some would argue no.
Senator, is there systemic racism in this country in policing and in other institutions?
No, not in my opinion. We just elected a two-term African-American president. The vice president is of African-American Indian descent. So our systems are not racist. America is not a racist country.
Hear me clearly. America is not a racist country.
I believe that we need to address, well, first of all, no, I don't think America is a racist country.
What does America's history with racism look like? Does racism and/or its effects still impact people living in the country today?
Well, for one thing, it means that we're showing to this parasitic class of anti-white vermin that this is our country. This country was built by our forefathers. It's sustained by us. It's going to remain our country.
If you're unaware, America has a pretty rough history of prejudice, racism, and atrocity toward just about everyone who isn't white. And even then there are some exceptions, but let's talk specifically about, say, Black history in the United States. Are you at all familiar with Black history, Mr. Droid?
No, I am not. Do enlighten me.
Okay, so the English first brought African slaves to the American colonies in 1619, and they were emancipated only after 250 fucking years of unimaginable cruelty. 10 million human beings were forced to live as slaves throughout this time and provided their white slave owners with 410 billion hours of free labor.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty fucked up.
Well, worry not, gentle droid. Thankfully, after the Civil War, the United States government engaged in comprehensive and far-sweeping reparations toward the newly freed slaves, ensuring their swift and safe integration into the contemporary United States society.
Well, that's good.
Oh god, sorry, I meant the opposite. The former slaves got basically nothing. No support, really, of any kind, and the slavers got those juicy reparations. After that, those former slaves and their descendants were still treated as second-class citizens, forced to live under a harsh regime of segregation for another century until the mid-1960s.
Shit, bro.
Well, it's okay, because thankfully, after the Civil Rights Act and subsequent Voting Rights and Housing Rights Acts, the United States finally engaged in broad, comprehensive reparations to help uplift the nearly 20 million Black Americans who were forced to live segregated lives, solving socioeconomic racial inequality for good.
Oh, well, at least this has a happy ending.
No!
Oh.
They didn't do that. Instead, they did nothing. Again, all of those people forced to live without the means to get good educations, jobs, houses, anything, were just told to fucking figure it out. It's been nearly 60 years and Black people continue to grapple with the effects of that horrific history and are dealing with racial discrimination in countless ways still today.
Damn, dude, I literally don't even have a heart and you just broke it.
Like, what if Taris just decided to free the people in the Undercity, allow them access to the lower and upper city regions, but give them no additional support and actually just continue to actively treat them poorly in other ways? They would still be shit out of luck. They have no wealth, no land, no assets, and they're less educated as a result of their circumstances, so they wouldn't have much knowledge of how to, say, lift themselves up by their bootstraps. They would need, oh, I don't know, something to make up for the generations of undeserved cruelty and trauma. Like, reparations? Today, Black poverty rates are more than double white poverty rates. The median income for Black households in 2017 was just $40,000, whereas for white households it was $68,000. The median wealth of Black families in the United States is $17,600. The median wealth for white families is $171,000.
Fuck, man.
Black people's debts are at higher interest rates, they're jailed at higher rates for the same crimes, they have shorter lifespans, they get fewer opportunities to go to college, they don't own nearly as many homes as white people. I could go on, but the fact is, they face systemic racial discrimination in every aspect of their lives today as a direct result of the United States' actions and inactions, both past and present. And this is just what the country has done to Black people.
So you're telling me that your society has done literally nothing to make amends for these horrible things you're describing?
Well, no, that's not true at all. In 2008 and 2009, the United States House and Senate, respectively, both issued formal statements apologizing for slavery.
What? Statements? That's it?
That's it.
That's it?
That's it. Yeah, so I don't know, Mr. Droid, do you think that racism is one of America's oldest traditions too?
I think that you need to get off of YouTube and go help some people out.
Yeah, it's hard, Mr. Droid. Some American politicians recognize the need for comprehensive reparations, but it's really an uphill battle. We have one political party that's outright villainous, and another political party that's also pretty villainous, but mostly filled with do-nothings who just posture with a desire for genuine change while doing none of the actual work. And a small minority of people who actually do care, who unfortunately oftentimes end up overcorrecting, making the whole movement look bad to everyone else.
I'm a descendant of settlers, and I believe in reparations in order to heal our nation. And we need to address racially based climate change in order to save our planet in order to save this race.
It's really about we as white people confronting our privilege in this system. And not just confronting it ideologically, but confronting it actually by giving back.
Can I have $5?
Are you serious?
Yes.
You got change?
Anyway, one final thing that's kind of interesting to note is that there are no aliens in the Undercity, just humans, which is weird. Was this an oversight? Was it intentional? If it was, what else does that say about Taris? Justice on Taris is harsh and swift. Execution or banishment. Are all alien criminals just executed? Kinda eerie, to be honest. Anyway, I don't know if there's much else to say about Taris and how it connects with the United States. There are a lot of other things going on Taris, which is why I think it's a really cool early level in one of the best video games of all time, but I was amazed at how many of Taris's woes could be directly connected to the United States. The vast wealth inequality, the mistreatment of lower class citizens, the extreme amounts of racism and prejudice, the fascinating way that these all too American concepts are presented on Taris is why I find it to be the most American Star Wars planet. Now, I know that America isn't the only country in the world dealing with these problems, and most places in the world are significantly worse off than even the poorest American, but among developed countries, the amount of problems facing America is pretty unique. What elements of Taris remind you of America or your own country? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Clearly, some would argue that homelessness is rising in America because it has too many social welfare